Welcome to Murder and Everything Else. My name is Joy.
And my name is Cheryl, and Joy and I are two very old friends who are going to talk about murder and everything else.
Hey, welcome back, all of our Murder and Everything Else listeners. I want you to know, Cheryl, that once in a while I'll read like a weird news story and I'll totally get excited about it. So I used to be obsessed with reading books and watching movies about, like Free Solo and Into Thin Air by John Krakauer, about these alpinists and these um, rock climbers, because it's just such a fascinating topic and something that I can tell you right now I'm never going to do.
Same here.
Yeah, and we talked about that documentary Free Solo and just how much we loved it, but um I get weird news stories that pop up, and they believe that they have found the remains of Andrew Sandy Irvine on Everest, and he vanished 100 years ago with a famed climber by the name of George Mallory. And it was what they found a boot with a foot in it and a sock, and the sock has A.C. Irvine stitched into it. Of course, it was 100 years ago, so maybe somebody was like, hand making his socks or whatever. Maybe it was a big thing to have your own name. But anyway, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, 29 years later, reached the top of Everest because these other two guys, Irvine and Mallory, were last seen on June 8th of 1924, and nobody ever knew if they summited or if they never summited, and it was the biggest climbing mystery of all time. But they found his boot and his foot and his sock. So it's kind of cool. Like, it's like piecing together a puzzle. And I just thought you'd really like that story since, you really like things with like
Wow.
dismemberment.
I like foots and socks. I like feet and socks in feet and boots. Um, that's incredible. Over 100 years. Wow.
Yeah, I know. And of course, a lot, it never is not frozen up there. So
Right. So it
a lot of
preserved it.
times, if people die and they just roll, off to the side, they don't bring them down. They leave them up there.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah. No,
sometimes
they can't.
they try to do recovery operations where they'll go and recover bodies, but there are bodies that are up there that just are going to be up there for a while. Because the other thing is, how do you know it's ever going to be uncovered? Because the snow and the wind changes the shape and face of the mountain.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is it's tough enough for people to summit that mountain by themselves, much less recover and carry a body down. So a lot of times they do just leave them there.
Yep.
Um, so that's incredible. Well, do you know if it was just happenstance that somebody found it or they were looking, somebody was on a mission?
Well, it says it was a discovery. And apparently, National Geographic or whoever was out there, sorry, yeah, it was a National Geographic documentary team that included a photographer and director named Jimmy Chin. Um, they just happened upon this boot that was melting out of the ice. And when they got closer, they could see that the cracked leather was old and worn. The sole of the shoe of the boot was studded and bracketed with a diamond patterned steel hobnails of a bygone era of climbing. So it
Oh
was
my
like a
God.
ancient relic, kind of.
Wow. Jimmy Chin is the one that did Free Solo too, right?
I
I'm
don't
pretty
know,
sure. He and his
but if
wife.
that's the truth, then I'm so impressed because I didn't know that, and I love that you know that. But if you go to nationalgeographic.com, Cheryl, they literally have photographs of the boot, itself and of the sock with the name stitched into the sock. And it's pretty amazing. I mean,
Wow.
and the
That
last photograph of George Mallory and Sandy Irvine, they have um, as they prepare to leave the North Col of Everest in June of 1924. They're standing in front of these little tents. Don't ask me how these dudes even made it there.
that's incredible. That first of all, that cameras were invented. Still don't understand how the most rudimentary camera works, because I know kids like have done it in school, right, where you make the box and then you do this thing and blah blah blah. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Anyway, I'm going off topic, but the fact that they have a picture of them, and I think this should start a trend of people putting their initials in their socks, because
Yeah,
that's like hard, evidence supporting the fact that it's him.
right. So crazy. Anyway, I just thought that was such a cool story. If you guys don't think it's a cool story, tough shit. Anyway, moving on to segue. I'm sorry, moving on to updates. We have added a new country to our growing list of countries, and that country is Singapore. So thank
Wow.
you to all our listeners out there in Singapore land. We love that you are listening to us, and that brings our number of countries listening to Murder and Everything Else to 16, a robust 16. Isn't that cool?
That's cool. And what's her name? Francoise isn't there, is she? In
No,
Singapore?
Francoise is not in Singapore. And I also want you to know, Cheryl and everyone else listening, that I don't know anyone who lives in Singapore that I know
Neither
of.
do I.
So I'm here to tell you that that listener is not my friend or my family.
That's awesome. That's so
Cheryl,
cool.
you got any updates for us?
I do. So I just saw on my YouTube pop-up, a California judge has granted Scott Peterson access to decades-old evidence in his bid for a new trial. So that's one step
Interesting.
closer. Although even though I did that episode on him and I said there's some reasonable doubt, I think he's guilty. I am still, however, supporting that the Menendez brothers get out soon.
Yeah, I am really interested to see what happens with those guys. Well, hey, I have a shout out today. And my shout out is going to the sister of my neighbor, and her name is Bonnie. And she repaired some beaded jewelry for me. And I just have to say, I know for a fact that Bonnie does not listen to this, but I'm giving you a shout out. She fixed a necklace, uh, 4 bracelets, and she did an amazing job. And it was all beaded jewelry. She took whatever the bracelets were strung on out and restrung it. And then she restrung the necklace and even changed the clasp. So if anyone local to me has some beaded jewelry that needs repairing or restrung, Bonnie is your girl. So hit me up and I will put you in touch with Bonnie. She was so I can't do that. So I'm just impressed.
That's cool. You had all the beads still, and she was able to
Oh
just put it
yeah,
back.
I saved the beads. So one of the bracelets was a bracelet that my sister gave me like 25 or 30 years ago. So it was very sentimental. And you know, I'm not a sentimental kind of girl, but I didn't want to throw it away. So she repaired it. I was just so pleased. And then the three other bracelets were little beaded bracelets that I bought in my 20s. Again, I'm not a sentimental girl, but I didn't want to just throw them away. So thank you,
Yeah,
Bonnie.
that's so cool. Well, also because sometimes some of our favorite things are old that you've had in a long time, and then to have to just get
Yeah.
rid of it because it broke is kind of sad. So that's awesome.
Yep. What about you,
Congratulations.
Cheryl? You got any shout outs?
I do have a shout out. So my skin has been not very good. That's not my shout out. My shout out is not to bad skin. But my skin is so dry here. I know I am not going to talk about how hot and dry it is here. My skin's been bad. I don't know why, but I've been breaking out. My skin's been breaking out.
Hmm.
And through the magic of makeup. So my shout out is to makeup. Makeup does a lot of things. It makes people look more beautiful. You can use, there's all kinds of makeup, right? There's horror movie makeup. there's like, there's, there's prosthetics to make people look different, whatever. Anyway, I hadn't seen my friend for a while. Christine, happy birthday. Well, her birthday by the time this comes out has happened a couple weeks ago. But we got together for her birthday, and through the miracle of makeup, when she saw me, she's like, "Oh, you look so pretty." And she goes, "Your skin looks fabulous." And I was like, "Yeah, thanks to the magic of makeup." Because I
Huh.
guarantee you, if I had gone au naturel and opened the door, she would not have been saying that. And I am not trying to downplay anything. I'm serious. The makeup covered up my skin and made me look radiant, and it was all a facade.
Yeah, but it's funny that you say that makeup makes you more beautiful. I think all it does is enhance your already existing beauty.
Oh, wow. But in this case, it completely hid my flaws because my skin has not been good. It's so frustrating. But
You got to come out here to this humid and
climate.
yeah, because I got to tell you, my skin has never ever been better.
Okay, I'll be out there tomorrow.
You come out here and you're going to see all the wear and tear from that dry lizard climate is going to just like reverse, and you're going to be like a glowing, supple, um and like beautiful and wrinkle-free version of yourself.
Oh, I can't wait.
Well, guys, this week we are heading away from murder. Um Cheryl and I are huge movie fans. She tends to head more towards the macabre, the scary, the jump screams, the, axe murderers and the serial killer genre and horror. Whereas I tend to enjoy the rom-com, the reality TV um, genres, but we both love documentaries.
Yes,
And
this is true.
yeah, it was what took us originally to the podcast True Story, which was Tig Notaro and Cheryl Hines. Cheryl and I absolutely love. Cheryl listened to it and then she turned me onto it, where they would watch a documentary and break it down each week. And it was just, their personalities and the way they would talk about the different documentaries was so good. But I'm always looking for a great documentary. So this week we're going to be talking about the documentary on Netflix that came out. By the time you hear this, it will have been about what, a month, 6 weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's called Will and Harper. And it is the story um of Will Ferrell and Harper Steele, who are best friends, and a road trip that they take across the country that starts in New York State and ends somewhere near Los Angeles on the ocean. When Will Ferrell and Harper Steele met, Harper was Andrew Steele, and they worked at SNL together. And that was from 1995 to 2008, which by SNL terms, I got to tell you, that's an eternity. That's
Right.
13 years. That's a long time. From what I've heard, working at SNL is no joke. So, if you can make it that long, that's pretty impressive. For those of you who don't know who Will Ferrell is, which I mean, I can't imagine there being people out there who don't. He is a funny slapstick humor guy. He was in the movie Elf. He was in the movie Step Brothers. He is just larger than life kind of character. He he was an old school. He just kind of plays like a big goofy doofus a lot of times. Although in Elf he plays a human size elf. But he's not everyone's type of humor. Um,
No, he's not.
right. Like Cheryl has shared with me that she doesn't like his kind of humor. But I will say that he totally, totally is my type of comedian. He's just, it doesn't matter what he's in, I will watch it.
That's
Um,
incredible because it doesn't matter what he's in, I will not watch it.
right,
Except for this because he's not playing a character.
right. So let me just give you a little bit of history on Harper Steele. Harper Steele grew up in Iowa City, the child of two University of Iowa professors. She attended Iowa City High School, graduating in 1979. She has described herself in high school as a C minus student who couldn't spell. She tended to hang out with outsiders, only feeling comfortable at school in her senior year when she became involved with the theater department. And she graduated from the University of Iowa with an English degree. And I just will also say that she has a slight lisp. Did you notice that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the beginning of this documentary, they do a little walk through history on their careers, showing little snippets of the silly, goofy films that Will Ferrell did, that Andrew Steele had a part in helping to write characters or develop characters or come up with the creative idea of the film, such as the movie, which is completely in Spanish, called Casa de mi Padre, which I have to say, which is the house of my father. I'll never get those 2 hours back, but it was quite literally the worst film. Probably one of the worst films I've ever seen. But yet, another film that Will Ferrell was in, which was Eurovision Song Contest, which was one of the funniest films I've ever seen.
Oh,
Um,
I've never heard of
and
it.
yeah, and for those of you who don't know, there is a Eurovision Song Contest every year where it's kind of like America's Got Talent or American Idol, where they vote on the best song of the year in Europe. And everybody in the European community comes together and votes on a song. And, it could be from Sweden or from Norway or from England or from France. And it's really cool. And so they wrote this movie based off of that. And of course, Will Ferrell's one of the performers. When the pandemic hit, Will Ferrell was shooting a movie in Boston and he got an email from Andrew. And in the letter, Andrew comes out to Will as a transgender woman. And he says, quote, over the years, I tried to figure out what was going on. I tried to get rid of it over and over throughout my life. And then he also says, now instead of being an asshole, I'll be a bitch. But mainly, I'm hoping I don't lose anyone I care about. And he signs the letter, name forthcoming, which I just loved
I know, me too. Yeah.
because I have to say that when someone gets married and they decide to change their name, I think that it's easier said than done. I can tell you that I was older when I got married than a lot of my friends. And I had not actually thought about what it would be like to lose my name. That's my identity. So when she says name forthcoming, I love it because, your name is so much a part of your identity.
Mhm. Yeah. And she said that she wrote it and rewrote it many, many times before she had the final draft because
Yeah.
that's hard. That's a big step coming out
Huge.
to the people you know and care about.
Yeah, she says that the biggest question that's asked when people come out of the closet is, will I still be loved? And I just felt like it was so striking to hear a 60-year-old woman say that. And then the question that Will Ferrell asks, and this is before they've met for this road trip, is where do we go from here? Because remember, Will Ferrell and Andrew Steele were best friends and coworkers and collaborators and creative minds that work together. But now it's going to be Will doesn't know, like, am I going to be making a new friend? Am I going to be transitioning my relationship with my old friend to accommodate the changes that this person has made? Um, there has to be a lot of questions, obviously, on both sides.
Right.
So they do the only thing that two best friends can do when one becomes um, a transgender woman, and that is they embark on a road trip across the United States. And Harper talks about road trips and loving the United States and driving across the country, which she's done a lot of times. And she laments that she can't do things like hitchhike or road trips that end up in sketchy bars, etc., because she's an she has a new self and she's a new person.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
I thought that was it's an interesting statement on society, because as a man, he loved going to like the diviest, seediest bars just because he could, or,
mhm.
and as a woman, he has to think twice about walking down an alley,
Yeah,
deserted alley.
but I love because yeah, they kind of have like a little going away thing when they get to New York City. And Seth Meyers is one of the people at the going away thing, and he says, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't even be caught on an alley. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
clear that when Harper was Andrew had some like interesting tastes and things. He talks about taking 3 t-shirts and the same pair of jeans on a cross-country trip. So it shows them packing their suitcases. And of course, Will Ferrell is larger than life. He does a lot of the slapstick kind of tongue in cheek humor that Cheryl hates. And so he's trying to pack a Sherlock Holmes costume and bring an alto saxophone. And Harper is shown trying to cram so many pairs of shoes into her suitcase that I
I
have
totally
to
thought of you.
say, yeah, it totally resonated with me, Cheryl. And I have told my husband and as many people who will listen that for me, every trip involves no less than 5 pairs of shoes. And here's how it works. Okay. I know this is a documentary about someone else, but I have to have a casual house slipper or a flip flop. That's so I
Mhm.
don't have to have my bare feet touch the hotel floor or the
Okay,
Airbnb because you never know
understood.
when you get out of bed at 2 in the morning what's going to be on the floor.
You. Uh-huh.
And the one thing you don't want to have happen is for your foot to stick to the floor ever,
Ugh. Or ugh.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Number two, so that's one pair of shoes. Then you have to have two casual like pair of sandals if it's summer so that you can alternate them with your different outfits. And then you have to have two dressy shoes like a heel or a wedge. Like one pair is a pair of sandal heels or strappy wedge or something like that. So that's your 5 pairs of shoes. If it's a winter trip, then you have to have 2 pairs of ankle boots, different colors for the different outfits, one pair of slippers because now your feet are cold, right? But you still don't want to step on the hotel Airbnb bathroom floor. And then you need a pair of tennies for the flight or for any long walks if you're being a tourist, and then a pair of dressy, tall boots. So, again, there's your 5 pairs of shoes. But a man travels with one pair of shoes, usually the one he has on. If it's a business trip, he'll have two, his business shoes and the ones he's traveling in.
Yeah. Which just supports my theory that it's so much more of a hassle to be a woman.
Yeah.
And God bless her for wanting to be a woman, because it's not all it's cracked up to be. And just packing for this trip shows that. It was so funny. One suitcase alone was taking up, oh, the shoes were taking up one suitcase by itself.
I know. It was great. It was so I so identified with that. Um
I
okay,
I totally thought of you.
I knew you would. So, full disclosure, I Cheryl and I each watched this twice. And I will say that the first time I watched it, um Harper made me uncomfortable with the way that she dressed and the way she did her hair and the kinds of outfits she put together. But I have to tell you that I think it's because I wasn't familiar with Harper's style, because the second time I watched it, I loved that Harper wanted to look cute and that she stuck mostly to wrap dresses and little like cute coats over it. She wore a lot of dresses and tights, and she wore different glasses in almost every single scene. So she had taken the time to source all of these different glasses that went with different outfits. What about
Mhm.
you? What did you think about the way that Harper presented herself? And did you see it any differently from the first time to the second time?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. So the first time you watch it, you're taking in so many things, and one of them is the appearance of Harper. So you're not focused, but that's a large part of what you're ingesting, right? The first time you watch it. The second time, because you've already been exposed to her and how she looks, you're focusing on other things. So I
Mhm.
agree. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead with this, it probably but I'm going to say it because we're talking about the way she looks. Where at one point, which you'll probably get to, but she puts on makeup and she says that she feels less herself when she puts on that much makeup. So that was interesting. While she has fun doing the transformation, putting on makeup, she felt less like herself. So that was very interesting.
It was. So Will has Harper pick him up for this road trip outside of a golf course in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. And it's pretty funny, tongue in cheek, typical Will Ferrell. Turns out that Harper doesn't realize until Will reminds her that they played golf there. But something I loved was Will and Harper hug, and he says, "You look great." And then he says, "I love your jacket." And I just love that little attention to detail.
Mhm.
Remember, Will is seeing Harper as a woman for the first
For the first
time.
time. Yeah. Speaking of jackets, can I just go back a little bit? So when they show Will getting ready in his bedroom and packing, he holds up this very tacky fleece, is that fleece? Jacket with
Mhm.
reindeer on it. And he's like, I'm probably not going to wear this. And he wears it throughout the entire documentary, which
Yeah,
I loved.
I love that too. So they are in some kind of a Wagoneer type vehicle with
Oh
wood
my
paneling on the side. I don't know
station
what that
wagon.
car is called.
The
Um,
station wagon.
yeah, but you know what I mean when I say Wagoneer, right?
It has the
It,
wood panels, you guys. It's
yeah,
like an old station wagon from back in the day. It was so funny.
right? And it's very I don't know, I got like a whole 1975
Yeah,
vibe from
for
it.
sure. Yep.
Yeah, so before they leave New York, they stop to have breakfast in the city with two of Harper's three kids. Um the kids talk about Harper still being dad, even though dad is a she. And I do love this interaction with her kids because remember, this is a relationship that she's had with two two children from the moment they were born, from before they were
Hmm.
born. And
Yes.
now there's something new. And
Yeah.
and I will say that I just love both of his kids because they're so flexible. And I bring to mind the word fluid. They're so fluid. And I love that they have hammered out that Harper's still dad, but dad's a she. And
Mhm.
that's all that they have to say about that, and that's it. And I also love
Well,
that one of the kids says she's more worried about Harper's mental health on this cross country trip than anything else.
yes, I really liked that she recognized that. And then Will had asked, how they took it, and the other daughter says she was worried about not having a masculine figure in her life.
Mhm.
Um, but then she just kind of shrugged it off like, but whatever. You know what I mean? A lot of us
Right.
grow up without a father or whatever. So,
Right.
but she did have him
Right.
for all
Like,
her life. It was just very recently. So it's not like she
mhm.
didn't have any masculine figure, but she did mention that.
So they stop at NBC Studios on the way out of New York to pay respects to the SNL studios and Lorne Michaels. The first person they see when they pull up, or at least the first person that they show, is Tracy Morgan, who they chat with on the street. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if you remember this, Cheryl, but Tracy Morgan had a horrible, horrible car accident and almost
Mhm.
died.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was while he was at SNL, and I'm sure he's not the same person he was before the accident. He's openly talked about having this accident changed him for the rest of his life. And so I love that he's the first person they see because obviously Harper has also gone through something that's changed her for the rest of her life.
correct.
So I just felt like that was kind of like a very meaningful interaction.
Hmm.
They meet up with some old SNL cast members and they have a toast and a meal. I didn't find it necessary for the documentary, but maybe the star power brought some viewers. It was Tina Fey, Seth Meyers, Tim Meadows, Colin Jost, people like that.
Yeah. Well, it was a very big part of her life, and it's where she met Will. So
Hmm.
I liked it. I didn't mind it. I was a little uncomfortable when they showed Lorne Michaels greeting them or her, because I don't know. I was uncomfortable by his reaction, and I could totally be reading it wrong. But
I think
he
it
looked
was the hug. I think the hug just kind of, was weird. I mean, if you work with someone, you're not necessarily going to be hugging that person, you know?
I guess maybe, and maybe because he's like the what producer creator, and the other guys, other people he met with at in the like conference room or whatever, they were coworkers, so maybe it
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
little different, the hierarchy. But I felt, and I might be misreading it.
So then they're in the car, they're talking about they're mapping out their trip where they're going. And then they start talking about how Harper came to choose the name Harper and the meaning that the name has for her. And she also talks about traveling the country in women's clothing all the time. But now she has to stop at truck stops and gas stations and use the women's restroom. Before, when Harper was Andrew, he could take off the skirt or dress and duck into the men's room, but not anymore. And I will say it was at that moment, watching it the second time, actually the first and the second time, that the reminder was this can be a very terrifying process and experience because there is so much misinformation and there is so much vitriol and hatred for things that we don't know or understand. In the long run, people just want to go to take a shit or go pee. They really, really, that's all you want to do in the bathroom. They're not
Right.
going into the bathroom to, staple gun your purse to the wall. They're not going in there to give you a tattoo. They're not going in there to climb up on
Convert
the
you.
sink. Yeah, climb up on the sink and shake their junk around. They're not going in there to convert you. All they want to do is take a
Go
dump.
to the bathroom.
Yeah. And but I'm watching Harper walk into the bathroom and I realize this is a lot more terrifying for Harper than anyone else in this situation. Because what do we do when we're fearful of something or when we're scared? We lash out.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Right.
The
Right.
other thing you have to keep reminding yourself is that there is a camera crew following them. And she's also with Will Ferrell, who is one of the most recognizable comedians and well-known comedians on the planet.
And this is something we talked about after we watched it the first time. So Harper does wants to do this trip as a coming out celebration, but also as I don't they use I think she even used the word experiment, but I think it's also just a an opportunity to expose her or introduce herself to the world now as this new person, right? And she
Mhm.
wanted to get a feel of what it would be like now as Harper going across the country to these places that Andrew loved to go to. I don't think it's going to be a true depiction for her because, or true experience, because she had Will. Not only does she have someone with her, she has someone that's very recognizable and the camera crew following them around. So,
Right.
whereas if she had been by herself or with a friend that wasn't famous, she might have definitely had different experiences than having a celebrity and a camera crew following because they're a distraction.
Mhm.
So, you walk in somewhere and people are totally drawn to Will Ferrell and this camera crew. So, you know, it's, and I'm sure she's aware of that. That this
Yeah.
going across country like she used to by herself as Andrew, and if she were to do it by herself as Harper, it's not going to maybe be all as pleasant as and positive as it was when she went with Will. Not that all of it was, because I know you're going to get to that.
And also, Cheryl, the other thing I just want to throw out there is it is so much easier to move through this world as a man.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
One of the things they like to do is they have some camping chairs and a little cooler. And when they get to someplace cool or fun, they open up their camping chairs and their cooler and they just kind of hang out, have a snack, have a drink, and enjoy their surroundings. And the first time they do it is at a Walmart parking lot, which is hilarious. But I just
Mhm.
have to ask, why do women always have to pack the snacks? Like, seriously,
It's
when
true,
we're
huh?
going anywhere, I'm always worrying about snacks when I'm going places. And it's
Oops.
so aggravating. I'm like, there's four people in this vehicle. Why am I the one packing the snacks? And guess what? Usually by the time I get to the snacks, they're gone.
Yeah. Because I think that people in gen like maybe men tend to wing it more, like they're not looking ahead at the fact they are going to want to snack on something.
Well,
And
maybe
women
then the men need to wing it with their own snacks or save some snacks for their wives. So they stop at a greasy diner and Harper gets misgendered by the waitress.
Mhm.
So they both correct the waitress and I have to say she apologizes immediately.
Yeah.
And Harper talks about not liking to be misgendered. And this was right around the time they go to a Pacers game in Indiana. And I don't know anything about sports or who the Pacers are, but I will say that I was bothered by the number of people staring. Now, remember, there's a camera following these two people. Harper's
Yeah, so
with Will Ferrell, and so people might be staring at Will Ferrell,
and this
but
camera crew, I mean, it's hard to really determine. This is what I was saying earlier. It's really hard to get a true read on the true reaction if Harper had gone there by herself or with a regular civilian and without a camera crew. I would think that the number of stares would lessen,
yeah,
tremendously. So it's not a true read to me.
right.
Um,
Well, I will say that the governor of Indiana came up and was talking to Will Ferrell. And I found it so interesting, just the body language. Harper is sitting down with her legs crossed, looking up at like three or four men who are standing in a little cluster, swinging their dicks around about this basketball game. And I kind of felt like, why are we dismissing women in sports? You know? I mean, just because Harper was born a man doesn't mean that she has less interest in basketball, but it was just the angle at which they were looking at her sitting down and the men were standing up talking and kind of not even including her in this conversation about the game. Um, it was weird. I almost
well,
felt like it was kind of dismissive of Harper. And also, of course, Harper's not the recognizable person.
yeah, see
So,
there again, I think the Will is a celebrity has a lot to do with the interaction. Also, I do think just simply the way they were positioned, because she was sitting and they were standing around like in a semicircle. It to include her was a little bit awkward, but also I did want to talk about this. It was very uncomfortable, just like I was
Mhm.
uncomfortable with Lorne Michaels' reaction, the governor's reaction. So Will says, yeah, we're doing a cross country trip, and I have my friend, I don't know, not verbatim, but basically my friend Harper just transitioned, and so we're doing this. And the governor kept glancing over at Harper, and again, I can't put words in his mouth or read his mind, but it wasn't a positive for in my opinion. The glances weren't positive from what I
Right.
was reading. I do want to just say, before the game started, they Will and Harper sitting next to each other, and Harper was talking about how before she transitioned, she used sports to really like solidify her masculinity, because she was in a man's body, and she felt like sports was what you do when you're a man. Of course, as she goes,
Mhm.
so I learned about all the sports, but I love it anyway, because women obviously can love sports too. But he did
Right.
say, it's like having a beard, right? Like when people have beards, you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
when you use a person as a beard. But anyway, yeah, it was uncomfortable. And then you'll go on to talk about what happens after that.
Yeah, and
After,
then Will actually says to Harper later in the car, apologizes and says he missed an opportunity to ask the governor of Indiana what his stance is on transgender issues. And I was going to ask you, um, what did you think about that? Because I felt like it was just kind of a casual meetup. This is the governor. I've never met them before. It wasn't like they were besties or had hung out. And hey, this is my friend Harper. It wasn't like a interview or a sit down or a meet and greet,
exactly.
at which point I kind of felt like it might have been a missed opportunity if that was like a town hall or something, but it wasn't. It was just like a casual, hey, this is the governor. Hey, here's a famous actor who's come to the thing. Like, for example, Cheryl, if you and I go someplace and I'm like, hey, and people flock up to you and go, ooh, Cheryl, Cheryl, ooh,
Oh my
Dance with the
gosh.
Star. And I go, oh,
Yeah.
and people,
First of
and you
all,
go, this is
I
my
wasn't on
friend.
Dancing to the Stars.
And then it's not like anybody's going to know who I am because I'm just a nobody. But you're kind of like, you suck up all the oxygen in the room because you're, somebody famous.
That's not a very nice way to put it. Okay, first of all, it's a little bit of a stretch, but I'm so glad you asked me this, because it is one of the notes I made. I I Will is in such an uncomfortable, maybe uncomfortable is not the right word. I feel like Will on this trip feels a, a need to be a spearhead for for Harper's transition. I feel like he felt like he needed to take, and he didn't need to take on the job of like of making this maybe not a political thing, but making this an opportunity to, like that, where he said that he wished he had used that opportunity to ask the governor. And I was like, no, it would have been completely inappropriate to me. Although everything is edited and we're seeing a snippet of what actually
Right.
happened, so I don't know how long they were talking, but to me it would have been so out of place to suddenly ask him
Yeah.
about a
Well,
very
the thing
debated
too is,
topic. It would have been
I mean,
so weird for him to say, and how do you feel about Trent? And he also,
right.
Harper was like, I didn't even know that was the governor. And I don't know if Will knew either, other than someone came up and said, the governor would like to meet you. So you can't, I felt a little bad for Will, because he felt like he needed to take on so much more than he did. And he didn't need to. That's how I
Yeah,
feel.
that's interesting. Well, I'll tell you right now that if you came out with, like, if you came out to me in any way, shape, or form, I, I, I can say because my personality is kind of over the top and I have inappropriate joke humor like Will Ferrell, I probably would want to like defend you at every turn. I would always be bringing it up. I would always, because I'm just that kind of person. I don't want a missed opportunity. I want everybody to know that this is my friend and this is something important. And it's not just important to me, it's important to her. You know?
But yeah, but I feel like it's the first time, it's the first time, a lot of first times. It's the first time that Will is seeing, meeting Harper in person. It's the first time she's taking a trip with Harper. It's the
Mhm.
first time Harper is going across country for the first time.
Right.
It doesn't all need to be tackled on this trip.
Right.
There's, I
That's
mean, some of
that's
it can just,
why that's why, like you said, we don't know what's been edited out or anything like that.
after that interaction with the governor, they show like flashes of the media, the social media the next day, and the governor had signed a ban on, what was it, transgender, let me look at my notes because I wanted to make, he signed a bill banning all gender affirming care for minors.
Oh yeah. But
Yeah,
also
so
remember that's minors, so that's under 18. And obviously Harper's 60, but I will tell you that obviously if Will Ferrell had asked the governor of Indiana what his stance on transgender issues was, I'm sure he would have said, well, tomorrow you know what I mean? Like obviously
yeah,
that guy was not going to be like sympathetic to anything that fell
right.
under the transgender umbrella.
Hmm. Anyway,
So
sorry.
the next stop is Peoria, Illinois, and they meet a woman who transitioned later in life. She was 65 when they met her, but she came out to her family at 55. She's lived in this small town her whole life. And she said that her first day of kindergarten, she walked in and sat with the girls. And then when they went to the potty, she got in the line with the girls. And she said
I
she knew
know.
her whole life she was a girl. And
Yeah.
when she got home, she told her mom about her day. And her mom said, no, sweetie. She said, you're a boy. You have different body parts. And she said it wasn't about body parts. It was about what's in here. And she points to her head. And you know what,
Yeah.
Cheryl? This is the part of the film where I stopped seeing Harper as a woman who transitioned to being a woman. And I just saw Harper as a woman.
It's amazing. The thing that killed me was when I couldn't catch her name. The woman that they were meeting with. But anyway, she said when she was in grade school, she said to God, fix me or kill me.
Hmm.
To be a grade schooler and feel that way is
Hmm.
just so heartbreaking.
And I will
Heartbreaking.
just say that later on, Will talks to Harper about suicide later on the documentary. And so
Trigger warning.
yeah, trigger warning. I just did a little bit of digging. A study from the Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law finds that 81% of transgender adults in the US have thought about suicide, and 42% of transgender adults have attempted it and 56% have engaged in non suicidal self injury over their lifetimes.
Mm.
So that just really broke my heart.
Yeah, that is so heartbreaking.
Mhm.
So heartbreaking.
Um, so this is where they decide in the documentary that they need a theme song for the road trip. So they toss
Oh,
out some names, and of course, they're all old SNL cast members, but they end up settling on Kristen Wiig, who I didn't even know was a songwriter or a performer, like other than a comedian. But it makes
uh,
perfect sense because if you think about it, all of these SNL cast members are all so incredibly talented. That's why they get
oh my
picked.
God.
They're not just funny actors and actresses. They're hilarious. They are, they can sing, they can dance, they can do improv. I mean, they can do
Yeah.
impersonations. Anyway,
Yep.
they're funny because they say they want it to be jazzy, funny. They want it to be a little
Country.
country. They want it to have a tempo. They want it to bring a tear to your eye. And then they give her like 2 or 3 days time to turn it around, which is hysterical.
They're
It's
like,
like,
there's no hurry, but maybe in the next couple of days. And she's like, okay. She's like, okay, yeah, touching. Make you want to makes you cry. You want me to make them cry. You want it country
yeah.
and jazz. She was like, all right.
Yeah.
And
Anyway,
if I didn't already love her, my God, after this, yeah, I had no idea she was this
so
talented.
talented, right? So
Yes.
the best joke of the movie happens here, and I have to tell you that if you're easily offended, you're not going to want to hear this. But Will Ferrell asks Harper if he thinks she's a worse driver now that she's a woman.
That was funny.
I died 1,000 times when I laughed so hard. Stop is to visit Harper's sister in Iowa City, and her name is Eleanor. But I have to tell you, Cheryl, and I don't know if you noticed this, but I felt like Eleanor's house was a staged house because if you go back and watch it, there are no photos or paintings on any of the walls. Zero. And she
Yeah.
walks down the hallway to show Will to his room. The walls are gray, very like stage home gray. Did they just move in? Did they rent it just for the show? Does she have OCD and she can't put anything on the walls?
Well, here's my and I didn't even that didn't even cross my mind. But now that you're saying that, I'm playing devil's advocate and saying if they staged it, wouldn't they have thought of those details? I'm pretty sure the production team would have thought of making it more homey. I don't
But
think they would have
also
just stuck her in.
But also, I thought about it. They don't want everyone in America knowing where the sister lives. She's going to
Yeah.
get bombarded.
Well, they could do something to mask, to hide that. So I don't know. I think that if the production team was, found the house to record in or to video or film in, they would have made it more homey.
Hmm.
So I think it's maybe the opposite. But who knows? You might be right.
Anyway, she mentions feeling sorry for Harper because of when she finds out because of all the pain Harper must have suffered through the years. So instantly she goes to, being sympathetic of her sister. And then she says it wasn't about how she responded so much as responding quickly.
Quickly.
And
I
she
thought
says
that
her
was very interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and she says that her answer was, "Oh good. I've always wanted a sister." I just wanted to like reach through the TV and hug her sister Eleanor. Plus,
I
I
know.
love the name Eleanor.
Her response couldn't have been any more perfect as far as being supportive. Yeah. I thought that
Yep.
was very, very true when she said, I didn't know what to respond or what to say, but I knew I had to respond quickly. Because,
Yeah.
you've asked someone something and they don't answer right away, and you're like, okay, that's a no. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even have to say anything.
Right, right.
But I agree with that. The quickness of her response meant
Yep.
everything. And saying
Um,
she always wanted a sister. That was
yeah.
cool.
But one of the things I just have to mention is Will Ferrell's comments about the snow were cracking me up so much. Is this a blizzard? Is this a blizzard? You can tell he lives in Los Angeles and is raising chickens because Cheryl, that is totally the kind of thing that I would say. Is it is it snowing? I have to go home. Like I have told I anytime I have a job, I have told my employer at the first snowflake, I have to go home because I don't know how to drive in the snow. And also, I am terrified after having lived here for 12 years of being stranded in the snow because it's happened.
Yeah,
So
no,
I
I'm
love it.
laughing, but I totally agree. I don't like driving in it either.
So the next place they stop is a bar in Oklahoma. And this part made me a little skittish. But when you go into this bar, you see misfits and outcasts, drinkers, night owls, smokers, barflies. And I have to say that Harper fits right in. And I don't mean that she's a misfit or an outcast, but I just mean that it is such a varied group of people that one more person is not going to tip the scale either for or against her. If anything, it just rounds out the crowd. And then she calls Will in because he's agreed to stay outside and let
Yeah,
her
so
go in by herself. Because
she
again,
wanted to
remember,
go in.
yeah, his star power pulls a lot of people up. And between alcohol, nighttime, a trans woman, I'm
The
sure
camera
that,
crew.
yeah, and the camera crew, I'm sure that, adding Will Ferrell to the heap is, I mean, who's not going to be receptive to that?
Can I just say real quick? So before she goes in, they're in the car and she tells Will Ferrell basically like, I got this one. Like she wants to go and experience it by herself because Will
Hmm.
has been pulling focus, as they say in the industry.
Yeah.
Um, but again, when they're filming her in there, I'm like, well, people see a cameraman. And I'm not trying to be a downer, but again, that's going to change the dynamic of
Yeah.
everything. When people see that she's being filmed, they know something's up. So it's
Hmm.
not, again, not going to be a true reaction. But anyway,
Right.
go ahead.
Um, Also, these two Native American men perform this song that's so beautiful. And I don't know, it kind of brings a tear to Harper's eye. And then as she's leaving the bar, people are shaking her hand, and it was very touching. And I realized, this is how people are in the world. Some are closed-minded and staring, some are open-minded and accepting, some are just learning, some are set in their ways. But most people are just trying to get from one point to another. And that's what Harper's doing through this. Even though she's cramming a whole lifetime into the last several years of her life, and she realizes she has a lot of work to do because she is a woman and she's only been a woman now for a couple of years. Um, she has to cram a whole lifetime into that. So it was very touching to see the way the people in this bar accepted her. Will asks her about dating, and I love that Harper says she just wants to wake up in the morning and have coffee with someone and talk about the stupid movie they watched the night before. And I got to be honest, I mean, who doesn't want that? So now they're in Texas, and I got to tell you, Cheryl,
Love
I
it.
am with Selma and
Love
Louise.
it.
I cannot go to Texas. Will Ferrell shows up. He dredges out this Sherlock Holmes costume. It was way over the top. People are so consumed with Will and his getup that Harper kind of gets lost. I don't know if it was intentional because they were in Texas or because they wanted to create some kind of conflict for the documentary. But the comments later on social media are not kind. Harper reads them in the car, and Will gets kind of emotional when he says, I'm sorry. He feels kind of like he left Harper out there to just kind of like hang out in the wind. Um,
Yeah, he says he breaks down and I felt really, really bad for him. It was very tense in that um it was a restaurant. It was didn't they have some kind of like huge piece of steak and if you ate it you got it free. So
yeah, it was
Will
in an
Will
hour.
order, Will orders that and he's in this Sherlock Holmes getup. And so there's seating around on a second floor that like opens up to the um, first floor. So everybody is standing around on like this balcony. Everybody has their phones out and they're filming Will. Um, but it obviously is not lost on anyone of who's sitting with Will, right? I mean,
Mm,
they're filming is because he's a celebrity, but yeah, and then the tweets and all that jazz that comes out is horrible,
yeah,
horrible that comes out. What is that thing Will was, sitting
yeah,
with and all this? And yeah, Will breaks down and says he felt like he didn't protect Harper and he put her at risk,
yeah.
which was
Comedy acting thing he did. The next stop is at the Grand Canyon, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but there's a conversation with a therapist that is so amazing. I will
mm,
also say that remember, everybody has had to transition. That's the thing that's so attractive about this, Cheryl, is it's not just Harper. We've all had to transition. And the therapist talks
one way
about
or
the work that she
mhm.
has done in 30 years and how 30 years previously she had a client and how she can't forget how close-minded she was, and that 30 years later she recognizes that. And so we have to remember that we all are in transition, not just Harper. Um, I also love that they go into a swimming pool in one of the hotels they stay at, and they're sitting in the hot tub in bathing suits. And Will Ferrell, of course, is doing his like over the top thing with this like Speedo that has an American flag on it. And he asks Harper about, being in the swimsuit in the hot tub. And Harper says, I wish that my bathing suit fit me better, but what woman doesn't?
I know. I love that comment because I was
And I
like,
was like,
yeah,
you
I
know
said it
what?
out loud too. So I'm
I
like,
was like,
yeah, I agree.
bravo.
Mhm.
Because it's true. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
constantly worried that shit's going to slip out of my bathing suit.
Can I just get back to the therapist? So
Mhm.
earlier in the documentary, um, it's when they meet the other transgender woman in Peoria, Illinois, and Harper. So that woman had a good therapist, but Harper shares that she didn't. The first therapist she had was very dismissive, and then she found a good one. So I just find it very interesting as we go along in our lives that sometimes at the right moment you meet someone that makes you grow and realize or recognize something or come to terms with something that happened a long time ago. So they just happen to be sitting on this wall at the Grand Canyon, and this woman is talking to Will and Harper, and when she finds out Harper has is a transgender woman, then she asks, right? And then she tells him she used to be a therapist, and then she shares her story about how, yeah, closed-minded, like you said, she was
Mhm.
with that patient, and I'm sure it brought her around full circle. So I thought that that was an incredible moment, especially
Mhm.
considering Harper's first therapist was not a very good one, and so
Right.
she shared that with that woman as well. Um, so I thought that was a very powerful moment.
So the next stop is Las Vegas, and they have a very fancy dinner in a fancy restaurant. And of course, you realize again, there's a camera person following them, maybe more than one, a lighting person, a sound person, probably a whole movie crew. So they can't go to eat at a fancy restaurant without there being approval from the establishment, et cetera, to have these people in there filming. And also, even if they didn't give their real names, they know it's got to be someone famous. And of course, Will Ferrell, typical Will Ferrell style, he has this amazing transformation thanks to costume and makeup. He looked like a cross between Liberace and Fu Manchu. The mustache is hilarious because halfway through dinner, it starts falling off. But the thing that struck me was Will Ferrell is being over the top Will Ferrell, and Harper's just Harper.
Mhm.
Will Ferrell says to the waiter, his name is David Abernathy, and he says, I managed Bette Midler for a little while and Air Supply.
Air
I
supply is
laughed
so
so
funny.
hard when he said
Oh
that.
my God.
I was like, it was too funny. If I'd been him, I would have said, I'm Liberace's son. But anyway, it was really interesting. I mean, of course, Will Ferrell's a comedian. They had to do funny stuff, because that's what people are expecting of him.
Yeah, and I think that it's just a part of him. I'm sure,
Mhm.
I mean, it's not always that he's on, quote unquote, on, but I think it's just a part of his nature to just, just be, it's like you. It's just your nature to be funny and cracking jokes all the time. It's just
That's right.
his way.
The next part of the film, I'm just going to kind of go over really quickly. It didn't really speak to me that much. But outside of the Vegas area, closer to California or in California, there is a house that she bought.
Oh my
And
God. This didn't speak to you? This was like one of the most
yeah, I mean,
powerful and sad moments of
I
the
didn't,
whole documentary.
it's funny, it didn't really speak to me. But it was basically a house. It had, you can tell it had been vandalized. She bought it for a steal. She wanted it to be her safe space where she could go and be a woman there. And then, just stand on the porch at night in a dress and, drink wine and not be Andrew Steele or Harper Steele necessarily, but just be someone and be someone that she wanted to be and not have anyone judge her for it. But I don't know. Maybe the reason it didn't speak to me was it was so dark. You know, you could tell that she had was in a bad space when she bought the house and a bad space when she went there. And then when you see what the vandals have done to the house, it's, it's just sad.
Well, it's dark things speak to me. So
Mhm.
I found it. Oh, this was to me the most heart-wrenching part of the entire documentary. She bought, like you said, she bought this house to be able to dress up and walk around in and not be judged. And then she never did made any improvements to the house. So it's really just a shack. It's a shambles, and that makes it even sadder. But she's standing on the porch with Will, and she talks about how she probably would have been judged in this little community that the house was in as well. Because
Mhm.
and then he asks, like, what do you think you're going to do with it? And he's like, Harper says, probably give it away. Because I think she's past that, right? The
Mhm.
point that she bought the house. But to me, it was just so sad. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So from there, obviously now they're in California, so they drive to the beach and you see them sitting in their little, camping chairs having a beer on the beach. And they talk about what they've learned from each other. And Harper says that she knows Will loves her. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Hmm.
I really liked that.
Wait a minute.
They
Are you going to tell them what Will gave her?
Yeah, and then Will
Okay.
says he bought Harper a present to commemorate their trip, and he pulls this little blue Tiffany box out of his pocket, and he had bought her a pair of diamond Tiffany earrings. And Harper gets choked up. It's just a very sweet, sweet gesture. And of
Yeah.
course, I instantly was like, why isn't someone buying me Tiffany diamond earrings? For fuck's sake. Anyway,
Because someone is spending his salary on your shoe and purse fetish.
at the end of the film, so now we're at the end of the film and the credits start to roll and I'm thinking, well, they never followed up with Kristen Wiig. And I start to get sad because I'm like, they asked her to write a song. And then after the credits have rolled, literally, you're into like the fourth or fifth person on the credits.
Yeah, don't if you guys watch it,
And
don't click off
oh,
after when
yeah,
the credits start rolling.
they get Kristen Wiig and she performs the song that she wrote for them. And I have to tell you, it is amazing. It made
It's
me
so good.
cry. The
Oh my
the
God, I
the
cried
chorus
too.
line from the song is a friend is a friend is a friend. And then there's a pause and then she says till the end. And she can really sing.
Oh, she can say the lyrics when she says they're like Thelma and Louise, but with a lot less depth. I
Yeah.
cracked.
And
The
a new
song
pair and
is
and a new pair of breasts. I love it.
yes, yes, and the song is exactly what they asked for. It's funny,
Exactly.
it's touching. She plays it on a little ukulele.
Ukulele.
Um, and then at one part she goes, "This is the jazzy part," and she does jazz hands. If nothing else, since we've described the whole documentary to you, if
Mhm.
nothing else, go to the end and listen to Kristen Wiig's song. It is freaking amazing. It made me cry and laugh. It is
Yeah,
she is so talented.
she's a treasure.
Talented.
So anyways, guys, that's the documentary, Will and Harper. And I have to say that if you don't watch this documentary, it's a crime. I watched it twice and it actually got better the second time. And I saw things I didn't see the first time. If you don't watch it, it's a crime. But you know what else is a crime?
What's that, Joy?
We are out of time.
That is a crime. Well, thank you for listening, everyone, and don't complicate your day. All creativity, commentary, and opinions in this podcast belong to Cheryl and Joy. Music composed and mixed by Gabe McKeon. Logo and merch managed by Cheryl Yamaguchi. Podcast editing, advertising, and social media managed by Joy McKeon. Legal representation provided by John Bojezic. Please like, subscribe, follow, and listen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible.com, Amazon Music, YouTube, and iHeartRadio. And remember, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok, or you can email us at murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com.
Bye, fishes.